Greetings adventurers, this is Lauren, your guild advisor, and in this video, I'm going to be giving my impressions as a light novel reader for the first 3 episodes of the second half of DanMachi Season 4. So that means Season 4, episodes 12 through 14. I wanted to do multiple episodes at a time. This one basically comprising of the Amphisbaena fight, so we're going to cover all of that and what I think of the anime adaptation, how it's going so far in the second half. A general impression so far, very positive, but we want to dive into some specifics of what I think about the adaptation in terms of how it's being adapted and just touching on specific scenes in general. I've released 3 cuts and changes videos so far where I compare the light novels and the anime. So check those out if you haven't, because I'm obviously going to be touching upon some spoilers and talking a bit about some of the stuff I discussed in those more formal style presentation videos. So let's just jump straight into episode 12. We just basically pick up right where we left off from episode 11 with that cliffhanger. And right away, as a person that's making these videos with the light novel to anime comparisons, I can already tell it's going to be a bit confusing on my end, because I discussed this in the cuts and changes videos, but the way volume 14 is structured is that it really kind of just divides the perspectives into like chunks of the novel. So like the first third or so of the novel is just pretty much about the expedition crew against the Amphisbaena and what they're doing on their side of the dungeon. And it's not until after that first third of the novel is over that we actually get to see Bella and Ryu. So as a person that was reading the light novel, it was slightly frustrating because, again, Ryu is my favorite character. So we had that super big cliffhanger from the end of volume 13, or the end of the first half of season 4, where Bella and Ryu fall down, are trapped on 437. And then, like, after like numerous delays with the light novel, it finally came out after like 9 months. So get to reading it, and we don't get to Belle and Ryu until like the first third of the novel is done. So it's like, man, I want to get to this part. So I can see why the anime is like readjusting how the story's being told here by switching back and forth between the perspectives. And that's understandable. Like, but what's going on with these characters? Why haven't we seen them yet? It'd be awkward to see Belle and Ryu not until like 3 or 4 episodes into the second half of the season. So I understand that. Though there are some weird things they've been doing with the sequencing of events in the anime, and I'll discuss that a bit later. The episode begins with a flashback between Belle and Eyes, as Eyes tells Belle about her impressions of the deep levels, the deep floors. And interestingly enough, the DanMachi mobile game, danmemo, it's been releasing side stories alongside every episode of the anime. And this time they actually kind of expanded upon that conversation between Belle and Eyes. So if you guys like don't play the mobile game, I link the complimentary side story after every cuts and changes video that I do. So you should definitely check those out if you want to see a bit more to the story, because they do expand upon some things. Like in earlier seasons, like sometimes they would adapt content the anime skipped, and that really bothered me because like this stuff should just be in the anime. But now it's like the side stories are actually expanding upon stuff that's not even in the light novel, so that's really cool. And just initial impressions of how they're adapting the Floor 37 content, they're absolutely nailing the tone and the color palette. I like the direction they went with the art, how like all the colors are muted, and like you can tell that it's a very dark floor. And they're really also nailing like how desperate Belle is, like how anxiety inducing the situation is there. And then we get to the tavern scene with the waitresses, so anime onlys finally see what that letter is about that Lily had. They kind of teased it last half when Hestia initially got the letter. In the light novel, it does actually say they like want reinforcements or help. Here in the anime, the reveal here kind of works, where you get to see exactly where these reinforcements are coming from with the waitresses. The only thing that was kind of omitted in the scene is before Hestia walks in, Seer is actually present and then kind of storms out of the tavern after dropping like Ryu's cup because it kind of felt like a bad omen. So she like leaves the scene, and in the light novel we don't actually know like where she's going for what she's actually doing. And the side stories with the mobile game, the ones that released alongside episodes 13 and 14, actually show her talking to Alan, which I thought was super interesting because, again, that's not in the light novel. It might possibly be like from a possible side story that was released from like a limited edition. I don't know about that, but either way, it's really interesting to see what Seer is doing and how they're going to incorporate Alan's side of the story, because again, like Alan and the rest of Freya Familia aren't really mentioned in Volume 14, so I'm curious as to what their roles are going to be. Like, it's probably going to be something that just runs alongside in the side story, but I'm really curious on what they're going to do with that. I discussed this before, but the initial reveal of the Amphisbaena at the very end of the first half of Season 4, I was a little bit skeptical on how the CG looked, but it really does seem like during that one season break, that they had some more time to work on it, and it looks a lot better. Like, it looks a heck of a lot better than I thought it would. So I'm really happy about that. They do a really good job of presenting the scale of the floor or the area that they're fighting Amphisbaena, as well as the scale of the Amphisbaena itself. The effects with its crimson mist and the flames are also really well done. And just some specific like parts in this fight. Like, I mentioned this in the cuts and changes video, that it like kind of bothers me when they do this, but when Mikoto was starting to chant her gravity spell, she's supposed to be like moving across the area, so she's not like a standing still target, and Chigusa is following alongside her. But what the anime does is, when Lily says to use her detection skill, Mikoto's detection skill when the boss dives underwater, in the light novel, Mikoto does use that detection skill, but she doesn't need to say anything to use it. And also, she doesn't like verbally point out the location of the monster. She doesn't say, yo, it's over there. In the light novel, she's still continuing her gravity spell chant, silently using her Black Yamato Crow skill to detect where the floor boss is, and then she visibly just points along where the monster is supposed to be, and Lily calls out that location where she sees Mikoto pointing at. And the reason why it kind of bothers me is because Mikoto interrupts her gravity spell chant to say these things, and normally interrupting your chant in DanMachi in terms of the magic rules, that would be kind of bad. That would disrupt the flow of magic and possibly cause an Ignis Fatuus, which is what you see Mikoto purposely do in Season 2, where she kind of just blows herself up against Samura. So the anime is kind of avoiding that kind of logic here, I guess. But it just kind of stuck out to me because I'm like, wait, that's not how it works. Welf obviously was a standout in this episode because of his little speech. And also, they've been doing a lot better job in general with the effects of the attacks and the magic, because in Season 3, when Welp is using the ice magic sword, it's the effect they use for it against Gareth is like practically invisible and non-existent, whereas here, when Welp uses the ice magic sword Hio, like it's a spectacle. Like, it actually looks intimidating, it's strong, impactful. Like, it wasn't that way in Season 3. Like, in general, like, Season 4 is just a big step up in terms of production. I'm not sure if that's just because they've had more time to work on it, because this is 2 cour, things are more planned out, probably likely, and also Season 3 was made in the middle of the pandemic era, and it was also delayed a whole season because of that in terms of Season 3. So there are a lot of things that could be the cause of that jump up in production value. But this is Season 4 in general is just a big step up in terms of production value from Seasons 2 and 3. Season 1 was really good and really solid. So I don't know what happened with Seasons 2 and 3. Things are looking a lot better nowadays. I think Daphne is a character that's pretty underrated in DanMachi, and she got some cool moments in this episode, but mostly what she does in this episode is give people some pep talks, and then they get their crap together, like Lily and Cassandra in particular. One thing I wish they did adapt from the light novel is because you see Daphne use her magic Ramur to like buff herself, and it makes her go faster or run faster. And she doesn't really do anything with it in the anime. But in the light novel, she actually saves Mikoto, who is a bit slow to react to something the boss does. So Daphne is able to grab her because she's able to anticipate what's going on, and also because she's a tiny bit faster than Mikoto, because she has, in addition to the level boost that Mikoto also has, Daphne's been level 2 a bit longer, and also she has the Ramure magic on her as well. So I wish they just kind of adapted that part so Daphne had like an action shot in the anime besides just giving pep talks. And just a little comment on the HiDive subtitles. I find it really funny whenever they translate like some of Aisha's more aggressive lines, because one of them's like, "Eat shit and die." I'm like, I don't remember Aisha being that vulgar in the light novel translations, but it was hilarious to me and kind of fits the tone of how you expect Aisha to act. So I'm a fan of that kind of language with Aisha involved. It's hilarious to me. A few weeks ago, I uploaded a video about my impressions about the new opening and ending. And in that video, I talk a little bit about a CG director called Tetsuro Tanaka. He actually storyboarded and directed my favorite DanMachi opening in terms of the visuals themselves, which is Season 2's. And he's also done the Index Season 3 second opening. And you can really see his sense of style, because in those openings, he makes use of like a lot of sweeping camera shots and pans, specific shots that like follow characters as they're moving. He doesn't really use many static shots because he always seems to have something on screen that's moving in some way. So it's more dynamic. And he's listed as an episode director specifically for episode 12 and the 3D director for episodes 12 and 13, and you can see a bit of his influence in these episodes in the Amphisbaina fight, because there are quite a few sequences where you see his style, like when Welp and Aisha are running together. There's a really cool sequence when Aisha, as the camera kind of follows her as she's like moving across the battlefield to get to the Amphisbaina. And there's a lot of really cool shots in these episodes like that. What some people might not realize is, like, obviously Aisha is hand-drawn by a key animator with how she moves throughout the environment. But in terms of the environment itself, a lot of it is built with the aid of CG, and that's why they can kind of move the camera in the way they do, so it looks really smooth along with the key animation used for Aisha. And that's a lot of work with the CG department for the backgrounds, as well as the digital compositing for the overall scene, how everything like it's brought together into one final shot. Again, the production value of this season has just been like top notch compared to seasons 2 and 3. I talked a lot about episode 12. We're going to go into 13, and this is where I'm going to go into like some weird decisions when it comes to like restructuring of events between the light novel and the anime, because they begin episode 13 with a scene with Tsubiki being recruited to be part of the reinforcements. Originally, this scene would have happened directly after Hestia recruits the waitresses at the pub. Why they moved this to episode 13, I'm not sure, because it's very weird, is like opening with this scene with Tsubiki in episode 13, then like the 3 or 5 minutes later into the episode, Tsubiki is down on floor 18. So episode starts with the Tsubiki in town on top Narario, and then like 5 minutes later she's on floor 18 with the rest of the waitresses. It's very weird in terms of pacing. So I'm not sure why they sequenced and restructured the events in that way. And something I wish they showed in the anime, like they kind of made this scene a bit faster when Tsubiki and the waitresses are on floor 18 and talking to Lewis and Dormal. I wish they showed the more serious side to Anya, because she was kind of no nonsense. Like, she's the one like asking Lewis and Dormal, where is Ryu, and asking questions about her. And in the light novel, like, Lewis is looking at Anya and he's wondering if he knows her, because he kind of recognizes her, but he can't figure out why. And I think why they may not have adapted Lewis's thoughts here is because in terms of people that only experience with DanMachi is the anime, they don't know who Anya is. Because like I hate I hate the adaptation of season 2 because it cuts a lot of the volume 8 content, and a lot of the volume 8 content that they cut like specifically is world building that gets referenced later on in the story. Like in season 3, because they didn't adapt the Seer side story or the Lily side story, a lot of the scenes in season 3 lose their impact. And here it's affecting season 4 as well, because in that Seer side story that was skipped in season 2, there's specifically scenes with Alan and Freya, and Freya directly like says, "Don't you miss your sister, or don't you want to keep watch over her?" And that's when an anime person would have known that, oh, Anya is Alan's sister. Alan, who was the vice captain of Freya Familia. But because that was not adapted in the anime, they probably didn't think it would make sense to adapt Lewis's thought processes here for season 4. Because, like, what do you mean? When was Anya Alan's sister? If you're an anime only. But yeah, it feels bad, but that's just what's happening because of how season 2 was adapted. And we didn't really get much banter between Suzuki and the waitresses, because that seemed to be skipped because it didn't go into that in episode 14. But I do hope they have some fun dialogue in the future, because I enjoyed seeing Suzuki just vibe with Anya, because I thought that was funny. And we also go back into Belle and Ryu running from Juggernaut. The anime skips a lot of the running that Belle actually does, because as Juggernaut is chasing them, Belle is actually trying to throw it off by like going through all these different turns in the dungeon. But the anime kind of skips all that, goes straight into Belle using Firebolt and it causing a cave-in so Juggernaut can no longer pursue them. I don't really mind that. Like, it makes sense. Like, why would you devote all that effort to animating that when it just ends in a cave-in caused by Belle? So it makes sense. Invest in the animation where it actually does matter, like actual fights, not running and then a cave-in. So makes sense. And in general, for Belle and Ryu's segments, again, I love how they're nailing the tone of Floor 37. And you get to see, like, something I liked seeing was how angry Belle was getting, which seems weird to say, but like he's yelling at Ryu and being legitimately angry at her. And this is like behavior you don't think you'd expect to see out of Belle. Like, you don't normally think of Belle as someone that would get mad at his friends, but that just goes to show how desperate of a situation it is for them on Floor 37, as well as how close they are, because normally you don't like get super angry at just like you don't get into a big argument with a random stranger. I also like how they adapted Belle's first encounter with the Skull Sheep. Like, you can see how ill-equipped Belle is to deal with it, how inexperienced he is. Like, he gets hit by several bone missiles, and the way he was able to beat it was by using his Goliath scarfed arm, and it hurts a lot to use that arm. Like, sure, it's not tearing into Belle's arm because of the scarf, but as I mentioned before, his arm inside that scarf is just like jello right now. Like, the bones are broken. The scarf is like the one thing that's holding that arm together. And I talked about the muted color palettes of the floor before, but you can really see how cool that effect is, because when Ryu uses her healing on Belle, you can see the colors start to have more contrast to them. So I thought that was a cool effect to see during the healing. And in addition to Belle like being super tense and desperate here, I loved how he just overreacts to like the sound of a drop of water falling down on the floor. He's full of anxiety, he's super tense, he's just straight up not having a good time right now on Floor 37. And we jump right back into the Amphisbaena fight, and one thing that an anime only might not realize is that this fight is lasting a lot longer than what you see on the screen. Like, they are fighting off screen and the battle takes a while, so I've seen some people say like, Cassandra only healed them one time. I'm like, well, there's stuff happening off screen. Like, you're not going to show like the whole like 1 hour long battle because if you played an MMO before, like a lot of times like in like boss fights or like a raid boss, sometimes you go back and forth between two phases. So like this is phase 1 of the fight, this is phase 2, and then it resets back to phase 1, and you do phase 2 again. And then when the boss is finally at like 20% health, it goes into phase 3 where it's a lot stronger. So that's basically what's happening in the anime. They're going back and forth between like phase 1 and phase 2, phase 1 and phase 2, and that's when Cassandra's doing her healing. And then they finally got to the Amphisbaena to a point where it gets really low on health, and now it's entering phase 3, and that's when it goes up the waterfall, makes that big tsunami, and then like kind of disorganizes the entire group. And I talked about this too, but it's like the anime is doing their best to make Cassandra look really bad. And I don't know why they're doing that. But during this tsunami, I should have mentioned this in the Cuts and Changes video, but during that big tsunami that the Amphisbaena made, Cassandra actually like jumps in front of Haruhime and Lily to shield them from a big piece of ice that's flying at them, and that hits her in the back. And that's why she's like struggling to get up when the Amphisbaena is about to breathe fire onto them, and Lily's trying to help her get up. And that's when, like you see in the anime, that's when Haruhime pushes them aside, and as we come to know, she covers herself in the Glythe robe to protect herself from the flames. But in the anime, for some reason, they did some anime original stuff and just had Cassandra like stand up, look all depressed, and start panicking about the prophecy, and she's just stuck there like in fear. And it made her look pretty bad in the anime, and I don't know why they did that, because I've noticed a lot of comments just trashing Cassandra when a lot of the stuff that they're mad about her for isn't really like her and how it was written in the novel, but more of how the anime is choosing to present her. And it's even worse because they do a recap of that exact scene in the next episode. Closing off episode 13 impressions, I love the expression they gave Aisha when she sees Haruhime get caught up in the flames. It sounds weird, like, oh, I love Aisha's shocked face, but it was a good expression that they drew for her right there. And then she goes straight into vulgar language. How she says, I'm gonna rip the head off your effing neck. Ironically, Aisha does not rip the head off. That's what Oka does. And then we go right into episode 14. And the way they opened up this episode was very interesting to me, because technically this opening scene between Ryu and Elise is not volume 14 content, which is what the second half of season 4 is covering. This is technically volume 15, and they might get into volume 15 as a type of epilogue when this season is all said and done, because a lot of volume 15 is like side stories that take place in the past that don't necessarily need to be covered because they're really not too important, but it gives a bit more background to some characters, but they're not really referenced. They just let you appreciate where those characters came from, but none of that is like really important to the present time in DanMachi. But one of those stories in volume 15 is when Ryu gets into Rario for the first time when she's 11, and how she's like looking for a familia, and she actually bumps into Jura, who tries to kidnap her. That's when Elise swoops in and saves her. And what you see here in the anime is just like the aftermath of that meeting, where Elise introduces herself and she asks for Ryu's name, and then she said, Ryu's too hard to say, so I'm calling you Leon. But yeah, that's actually a volume 15 scene, so it was very interesting to see they adapted that. But this scene is technically referenced in volume 14 because it says like Ryu remembers the moment that Elise started calling her Leon, but it wasn't like an exact description of where they were. Like you see them around the fountain area in volume 15 and in this anime. The only, if I want to be like super nitpicky, the one thing that like kind of confused me, like besides the fact that the character designs for like 11-year-old Ryu and 13-year-old Elise is pretty much the same as 16-year-old Ryu and 18-year-old Elise. I don't really blame them too much for that, because in terms of 11-year-old Ryu and 13-year-old Elise, you're like, that's probably the only time you will see them in the entire show. So making entirely new character designs for like a 45-second scene might be asking a bit too much. The only thing that like stuck out to me though was seeing the weapon that Ryu had on her side, because it looks a heck of a lot like her signature sword, Ob's Lumina, but Ryu does not get that sword until she's 14. So unless that's some other random wooden sword, it's a bit weird to see. But Volume 15 does specifically mention a short sword, so that didn't look like a short sword to me. And also, Elise's sword looks a heck of a lot like the sword you see at her grave, and you'd think that at some point Elise would have switched out her weapon between being age 13 and 18, unless it's a similar situation to Belle's Hestian knife where it scales with her, but I don't think that's what it was. But yeah, again, they probably just didn't feel like making new character designs for characters who will only appear at that age for like 45 seconds. And they also did a second scene with Estrella Familia, and I talked about like how they've been structuring the sequence of events in this anime adaptation, and it felt really weird just like having that scene for 45 seconds in this one, because we're going to see the rest of that scene for a lot longer than 45 seconds in the next episode probably. If they wanted to keep this like 45-second tease, I think they should have just ended the episode with that scene where like the episode ends and Ryu is like, oh, I'm back here in Estrella Familia in her dream, instead of just having it, like, cause it kind of feels like a cliffhanger kind of thing, except it's a cliffhanger that happens in the middle of the episode. But now let's get into Ryu battling the Skull Sheep. So it's a bit different between the light novel and anime, because in the light novel she has her two short swords, sticks them into the ground, so she has easy access to throwing them. The way the anime does it is that she throws one of the swords and then tries to fight off the other two Skull Sheep with the remaining sword in her hand, which probably makes a bit more sense, because in the light novel version, she's just like, well, I got two throwing knives, and then once I throw the second one, I guess I'm just going to use my fist or whatever. But it makes a lot more sense for her to try and keep her last weapon and try to fight with it instead of throwing it away and somehow thinking she can beat the third one with like her body. So it made a bit more sense the way the anime handled that scene. And it's actually really cool to see it, because there's like a stark difference between Belle and Ryu in terms of experience, because like, of course, Belle is exhausted. It's his first encounter with the Skull Sheep. He was only able to beat it after like getting hit by multiple bone missiles and then using his arm as a shield. And Ryu basically takes down two of them on a broken leg and still manages to deflect the bone missiles of the third one. And then Belle, of course, comes in through the clutch, throwing Hakugen to beat the last one. But again, you can see how much more experience Ryu has with the Skull Sheep, just based on how she handled the situation versus Belle's first encounter with one Skull Sheep. One sequence in particular I liked in the show was when Welf uses his magic sword to create that ice path for Oka and having Oka like run up it. That was a really cool sequence. I do kind of feel bad for Oka, because they do, of course, adapt Oka severing the red dragon head. But they didn't give my guy a flashback like they did for Mikoto, because in the earlier half of season 4, they did a flashback for Mikoto for when she is being taught by Take Mikatsuchi how to use Zeka. And in the light novel, Oka gets a similar flashback for him using Koku, but they didn't give him that for this episode. And there was absolutely like time to do it, because they didn't need that recap in the middle of the episode. That felt so weird, having a recap that starts in the middle of the episode. But that could have been like time used for this flashback to Take, like teaching Oka about Koku. It's just weird that Mikoto got her flashback for like a more minor monster, and Oka literally severs the head of a floor boss with his, and he don't get no flashback with Take. So I kind of feel bad for that. I mentioned this in the Cuts and Changes video, but the Haruhime scene is very different in the light novel, because here in the anime, you have Haruhime like taking off the cloak when she's in the flames, like, a surprise, I'm alive, like I'm an escape artist, and she's in the flames doing her magic. Whereas in the light novel, she's like covered in the Goliath robe. The flames are all burning around the robe where she is. And so she's basically kind of being baked in an oven, and she's like struggling to remain conscious while she's doing her chant. The shot we got with Haruhime looks really cool, like with the zoom out shot with her in the flames and posing. There's that, but at the same time, it does seem like a bit silly to see Haruhime just take that off when she's in the middle of all the flames. So I call it the rule of cool. If it looks cool, you can just forget about logic. The anime continues to do the interrupting the chant thing, because Aisha starts her Helkaio's chant right before she gets level boost in the anime. She tells Haruhime, "Give it to me now," or whatever, and then continues her chant. Again, interrupting her chant, which is a big no-no in DanMachi magic rules proper, but whatever. I did mention in the Custom Changes video that Aisha's final sequence against the Amphisbaina is a bit different. In the anime, you get Aisha like charging up to the Amphisbaina, doing her chant, and she like jumps into the path of the flames, which is just a no-no. She jumps into the path of the flames, and then she uses Helkaios to like push back the flames away from her. It does look like visually cool, and then Helkaios eventually reaches the Amphisbaina, and apparently it does enough damage to make it turn to ash. But in the light novel, it's a lot more visceral, and maybe it's just like asking too much of them. Like it's fine to have like different ending sequences. What we got still look cool, but imagining what it might have looked like with the light novel version, where Aisha is chanting, she like tears into its neck as it tries to breathe fire, and instead of the fire like coming out of its mouth, it's coming like out of its neck where Aisha opened the wound. So then the flames get all over the Amphisbaina and it starts burning. And then Aisha, like, is still attacking while chanting, does a slash against its body. And then she finishes the chant. And very much like the fight against the Minotaur with Bell in Season 1, like how Bell, like, sticks his Hestia knife into the Minotaur and then starts casting Firebolt. It's very similar to that, where Aisha slashes into the body, unleashes Helkaios, like, into the body, and then it reaches to where the magic stone is, and Aisha knows where the magic stone of the Amphisbaina is because she's fought it before. So her experience is coming through here. Different versions for the final sequence of the fight, but either way is cool. I just would have been interesting to see how the light novel version would have looked visually, but we have more fights to go, and I'm really hoping that the final fight of the show is a visual spectacle, because like imagining the final sequence of the final fight of this season, if they do it properly, like I saw it in my head when I was reading it, I'm probably just gonna start tearing up. And then we have the aftermath of the fight, and this is really where they should have showed Cassandra's like whole thought processes about the prophecy, instead of like showing her thinking about it when everyone's having like this discussion. It would have been a really good way to present this, but the anime doesn't show this, but it's specifically stated like in the aftermath of the fight, Lily and Cassandra are healing everybody, like specifically Mikoto, who is in really bad shape because she was in her own gravity spell when she was underwater. Again, like it feels like the anime is doing everything it can to like put a negative light on Cassandra, but she does help heal Mikoto here in the aftermath of the fight. They just didn't show it. But that would have been the perfect time, like while she's healing, it would have been the perfect time to show Cassandra like thinking about the prophecy and all of that. So I don't know, it just weird to me how they've been presenting Cassandra, because I've seen a lot of discussion about her, and it's definitely not positive among anime-only viewers. But we finally get to the end of the episode where Cassandra starts to assert herself more and get Daphne to believe in her instead of the prophecies that she's been having. And then we get teased back into Belle and Ryu. And the preview for the next episode has already been released, so I actually have a clue as to what content I need to read. Again, it's been really weird with having to do the cuts and changes videos, and I always read ahead of the content, but it's because they're like jumping around between perspectives, which means jumping between like the first third and second third of the novel. I had to like jump back and forth between the book and try to kind of guess what exactly they're adapting. But it seems we're getting stuff about Wealth and getting that extension of the Estrella Familia flashback, and I'm just ready to see more Estrella Familia stuff, so excited for next episode. And I'm really curious on how they're going to handle Wealth stuff, because the episode is titled after Ignis, his adventurer name. Very curious on how they're going to handle Wealth, because some of the stuff that's going to be happening, a lot of the inspiration that he has for the stuff that is coming up is from content that the anime skipped in season 2. Like, once again, because they skipped a lot of stuff from volume 8, future seasons of the anime are still feeling that effect. So hopefully they cover some of that stuff that they skipped in season 2. Otherwise, I'm just gonna have to cover it, I guess. And that pretty much sums up my thoughts and impressions for episodes 12 through 14 for season 4 so far. I'm not sure what my cutoff is going to be for the next impressions video. Like, we'll see. But one thing I do want to mention is that volume 18 is now out in Japan, so be very careful of spoilers if you want to avoid them. Like, straight up, probably just don't look at the DanMachi Wikia page or the fandom page. Like, just straight up don't look there, because they're like really bad at like enforcing like spoiler warnings. So just don't even go there if you're worried about spoilers. I think I'd seen like one spoiler image from volume 18, but it was just a status page in my Discord. I was a bit upset that I saw it and I had to promptly delete it. But at the same time, I'm like, it is a spoiler that I saw it, but at the same time, it just gave me more questions, because I'm like, wait, I had to do a double take when I saw it, because I questioned whether or not that image was real. And then I got to that weird situation where I'm like, well, now I need to confirm if this is real, but I don't want to confirm if this is real, because then I'd be spoiling it myself for sure. But so it's really weird. But yeah, what I saw on that status page just gave me more questions and answers. Like, wait, how is that possible? But yeah, whatever. So yeah, just be on the lookout, or don't be on the lookout for volume 18 spoilers. But yeah, that'll be it for this video. I'd like to see what your impressions of the first 3 episodes of the second half are in the comments below. If you're a light novel reader, how do you feel about the adaptations so far here? Like, I think they've been nailing the tone of Floor 37 and the desperation and anxiety of Belle. That's been done really well. The only like real grievances I have like specifically had to do with, I guess, Cassandra overall, and a bit about how they've been restructuring some things and how it not necessarily flowing well in terms of pacing, but that's about it. But yeah, curious on what your guys' thoughts are. Please remember to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more DanMachi content, and to follow me on my socials. And as always, this is Lauren, your guild advisor, signing out.